Buckeyes Live. We come your way each and every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern Time, right here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. We welcome you in. I have sent out our live link out to our guests, our panel that join us each and every week. So I'm waiting for them to come online, but thought I better jump on since we're just a couple minutes late. So we apologize for that. Of course, many of you know that we have 3 consecutive live streams that we present every Wednesday night. Florida State at 7, Miami at 8, and Ohio State at 9. So sometimes we run a little bit long and it gets a bit backed up. But here we are in preparation for not a Saturday game, but a Friday night affair at Ryan Field against Northwestern as the Buckeyes take on the Wildcats. This being one of those games that many people during the offseason had tabbed as a possible trap game for the Buckeyes, a la Purdue and Iowa the past 2 years. They've already cleared one of those hurdles, being at Nebraska, 38-0 at halftime, and a 48-7 win for the Buckeyes. The Buckeyes have not been challenged as of yet. Michigan State looked to be that team, but they were not, certainly at the shoe a couple weeks ago. There's been a bye week now, and now taking on a Northwestern team that provides little offense. One of the worst 5 offenses in the FBS right now by most measurements. I'm going to check out the comments, and then hopefully, the likes of Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone, Steve Hellwagon from 247 Sports, Bucknuts, Kevin Noon from Rivals, Buckeye Grove, and also Claire Crawford from the Buckeye Report will join us soon. I may have to check on that link because I sent that out now about 4 minutes ago, and typically they're coming on. Here we go. We got Kevin Noon on the line. Kevin, how are you?
Still trying to get my shot set.
Oh, you work on it there. We're kind of stumbling along here, basically. Since I was a little bit late, I just thought I would come on, and you guys can filter in as you come on, and I'll take some comments, and then you can let me know when you're ready. Here in the next few minutes. The Buckeyes have the hardest road to the playoffs every year, according to Sting. Not complaining, wouldn't have it any other way. They send chills down the Tide's spine. We appreciate Dale Sherm, joins us on a regular basis. Greetings all, and go Bucks. Jeffrey Klosterman, go Bucks as well. Dale coming back. Sting, it really doesn't help that our last regular season game is against Michigan because I fear they are not considered a quality win anymore. We will see once we get to that point. And, of course, there is the Big Ten championship game. The Northwestern game is on Friday night on BTN. It's been switched because of FS1 dealing with the baseball situation. So, Kevin, you nod your head, aware of that. I was not. I did factor that into my thinking. That did cross my mind that they would have to play the consecutive baseball games because of the rain out and the travel day being wiped out. So now BTN gets the game at Ryan Field. All right. So, Kevin, I think you missed our last show. That would have been post-Michigan State. That was supposed to be the toughest challenge to date. Now we know Sparty goes to Wisconsin. They get wiped out there. So we're still trying to find that barometer game. We're most likely not going to get it this Friday night. No. But what really stood out to you? To me, it was obviously J.K. Dobbins in the running game against a rush defense that had been the best in the nation, not just this season, but last year, and really being able to pound it forward for big yardage, plus 300.
Right. I mean, everybody wanted to talk about Michigan State's defense, and they traditionally year in and year out, are really good at what they do, but Ohio State was able to get out there and impose its will. J.K. Dobbins was able to run the ball, and another 170-yard type of outing. He had the long touchdown run, which everybody's been waiting for. He's now, after that game, was the leading rusher in the Big Ten, 1 yard more than Jonathan Taylor out of Wisconsin. And, I think that he's on pace to set some really special numbers if the season goes 13, 14, 15 games. Granted, when Eddie George had his record-setting season, there weren't quite as many games at that point. But, Dobbins really has regained that form that everybody loved in 2017, and they're getting to see it here again in 2019. And I just think that the Ohio State defense was able to do a solid job. But nobody really was touting the Michigan State offense for being explosive by any stretch of the imagination. They got some yardage between the 20s, but Ohio State has a top 5 red zone defense in the country, and it really showed in that game.
When you talk about the J.K. Dobbins performance this year, coming off what was a lackluster year for the most part, he certainly had the Maryland game and saved them there going into Michigan last year. But he was so exceptional as a freshman, down year last year. Do you think just a lot of things came together, improved offensive line play, and his just dedication to there was talk about, and you talk to these guys all the time, so you can probably fill in a lot of the gaps that I'm presenting just in regards to his workout, taking what is a near world-class athlete and refining him from like 12% body fat down to 8 and just being that much of a better runner because of it.
Well, I think he has a lot more confidence. I think he's in a lot better shape, and you have an offense that is much more set up for a rushing attack. And because of that, when you sit there and you have the run blocking going on, he's able to sit there and break out those big runs. And it's not going to be a case of them protecting Dwayne Haskins in the pass pro and everything along those lines. So I mean, they're getting out there. You're seeing. I mean, everybody wanted to talk about it being a new offensive line, 4 new starters. But, I mean, these are some dudes out there. And, that's not taking anything away from the line last year or any year. But, I mean, he's got some guys out there who are opening holes for him. But, I think when you get some of that success and you taste that confidence, because of that, he's able to just build upon it.
Kevin Noon joins us from Buckeye Grove. You can join him right there at Rivals, the Buckeye site there on Rivals Buckeye Grove. Our guy Lucas Abner, he knows the deal up there at Northwestern. This is they've got some gamesmanship. They know what they're doing up there. Might grow the grass a little bit longer there because of the speed factor, maybe slowing down the Buckeyes. Interesting comment there, but certainly yes. If you look at Northwestern's field down through the years, it has not always been one of the best maintained in the Big Ten, and they will look to possibly get any advantage they can against what against them would be a track squad at Ohio State. Is there anything about this Northwestern team that scares you or concerns you in any possible way?
I mean, they have a pretty solid defense. I think that the offense is pretty anemic, and I don't know how they're going to score enough points to put a fright in Ohio State in any stretch of the imagination. But, I mean, it's a lot of the same names on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, they still have Patty Fisher. They still have Joe Gaziano. I mean, they still play a defense where they keep everything in front of them, really try to limit the big play. Granted, Ohio State was able to put up 45 points on them last year in the Big Ten championship game. But, I go through the offense. They really don't know what they want to do at quarterback. Hunter Johnson has been a little dinged up, but he really has not been effective this year. Aiden Smith has been who they've gone to some. I mean, his numbers really aren't significantly better either. You look at the running game, it was Isaiah Bowser last year during the Big Ten championship game. He's back on top of the depth chart, but Drake Anderson has had more of the carries this year just based on his health. And when you look at their receiving core, I think their leading receiver had something like 150 yards, and he's hurt. So he's not even going to be there. So Riley Lees becomes their number 1 receiver. And, a guy can always break out and have a big game, but he hasn't had that big game yet this year. So I just really don't see anybody on the offensive side for Northwestern that should give, any fits to Ohio State in terms of what you see on paper. You got to get out there. You got to play the game. I don't think anybody thought in the early 2000s that a team led by Brett Bazinet up in Evanston was going to knock off the Buckeyes. And, it happened there. But, that was a much more, a much deeper team.
Yeah, so you're talking about 2004 game?
Yes.
Yeah. So this was 2 years after the national championship. Obviously, they went up there 2 years earlier, and Maurice Clarett had to have a big second half. They only won that game like 27-16. Then they go 2 years later. They lose in overtime. Yeah, they lose in overtime 2 years later. Yet Brett Bazinet. Riley Lees is kind of a poor man's Tim Dwight of sorts. Yeah, he's got 19 catches this year at a whopping 7 yards per reception. So, I mean, a very poor man's Tim Dwight. You're referring to Ben Skowronek. I've never been able to pronounce his name correctly, and he's been around the program for a while. Skowronek, I believe, 12 catches for 141. Yeah, their leading receiver. We are at the halfway point of the season. Their leading receiver has 141 yards. They have thrown 2 touchdown passes. I knew it was bad. I haven't looked at the stats for a while. Hunter Johnson, the big 5-star from Clemson, has 1 touchdown pass, 4 picks, 48% completion percentage. This is in the year 2019, 48% completion percentage. Aiden Smith, the walk-on after they TJ Green was their other quarterback competing with Hunter Johnson. Aiden Smith, 49%, 1 touchdown, 4 picks. They've thrown 2 touchdowns and 8 picks, Kevin.
Well, just to even add to the numbers, J.K. Dobbins outrushes the entire Northwestern rushing offense by, I think it's somewhere in the 65-yard range on something like 95 fewer carries. So, I mean, the numbers are pretty staggering when you look at them there. And you know, you just don't know where that offense is going to come from. There's not been really any consistency. I mean, you look at their defensive numbers. I mean, they held Wisconsin to very workmanlike numbers, 24 points, something around that range. But I think that it's a case of Wisconsin, as well as Jack Cohn is playing, as much as it pains me to say that based on all I've said through all the weeks and all the months and everything there. I mean, he's been very much a game manager, but they're a running team. And Ohio State brings a really balanced team into this game, and I think that's going to create a lot of issues because it's not a case of where you're going to be able to put 8 in the box and just say, okay, go beat us with the pass. You know, with Jack Cohn, maybe that's a little bit more challenging than with Justin Fields.
Yeah, so you mentioned some of the defensive crew. Patty Fisher, Blake Gallagher have been 2 of the best linebackers in the Big Ten in recent years. Patty Fisher comes in with 37 tackles, Blake Gallagher with 33. Gaziano has 6.5 tackles for loss and 3.5 sacks, by far their best numbers along the defensive front. J.R. Pace, one of the best DBs in the Big Ten, but my goodness, they have really got to carry the load with this offense. I watched the Wisconsin game, and it was a miracle that they stayed within striking distance in that game. They went down 24-3, and yes, it was just by guile and technique and toughness and grit because their offense could do not. It was painful to watch. Just for them to throw an outlet pass to gain 4 yards was an accomplishment. It was so bad, but they just somehow hung in there, and it was 24-3. Then they got like a tip pass and a break here and a break there and a play on special teams. And before you knew it, besides Pat Fitzgerald making some questionable coaching decisions and going for 2
chasing points,
when it's all lined up for you, you score the 7s, you get from 24-3 to 24-24. So he could have been at 24-17. He's at 24-15, and they really didn't have a shot, and that was the final score. But they did put a slight scare in Wisconsin late. Again, just I don't know how they did it. It wasn't like they were nailing 20 yards passes down the field and mounting 80-yard drives. They somehow got themselves, they pulled off a few plays in special teams and defense and got themselves back in the game. But just an ugly throwback offense. I saw them play most of the game against Stanford early in the season. And my thought was, okay, I know Stanford's not really that good, but they're probably top 25 good, and Northwestern could do nothing on offense in that game. It was a final of 17-7, but I thought, okay, well, they're not good on offense. But I didn't realize until then Stanford went and started playing other teams, and they started giving up 45 points to UCF and USC. And I was like, my goodness, Northwestern is awful. And this is just continuing for them on through the season. 48% completion percentage and 2 touchdown passes.
Right. I mean, it's just really hard to find anything there that's been going well in offense. I mean, their big win was what, UNLV. I mean, they put up some points there, but outside of that, I mean, if you look at Northwestern's offensive numbers in Big Ten play and put them up against Rutgers' offensive numbers in Big Ten play, I mean, while Rutgers has been all-time low, Northwestern is right there too. I mean, Northwestern and Rutgers are right there, about 72, 71 points scored over the season, but Rutgers has the benefit of an extra game that Northwestern doesn't, so that doesn't make it look quite as bad for the Wildcats. But Ohio State just doesn't throw the ball around in terms of being fast and loose and putting it on the deck that much. And it would really take Ohio State being about a -4 in the turnover margin and giving Northwestern a very short field for them, honestly, to break 20 even. And I mean, I have a hard time seeing them breaking into double figures.
David Greenshield, we appreciate the contribution so much, more than you know, in helping us build the channel. So thank you for joining us for Ohio State Buckeyes Live. We got Kevin Noon on the line from Buckeye Grove, so you got to check out his work over there. Kevin also with a YouTube channel on Ohio State football. What have you posted lately over there?
Not a lot. We're still coming out of the open week last week. I mean, we've been putting the press conferences. We do have our own podcast, Buckeye Grove Instant Access, that we try to do right after the game. A little quick and dirty, 15 minutes. We'll do that after the Northwestern game. But we will have some footage. Wrong sport, but we were at Ohio State basketball earlier today and got to see some practice. I'll get that posted in the morning, and we'll start talking a little basketball, especially once we come out of the Wisconsin game next week and Ohio State goes quickly into that second open week. So,
Kevin, as you took in the Ryan Day news conference this week and also talked to the Buckeye players, was there any particular themes or storylines that hit you?
I think it's just a matter of self-reflection coming out of that first open week, having a week where you're not preparing for somebody. If you're a player, having a sit-down meeting with Ryan Day and or a position coach and going over things that you can do better. And then just with Ryan Day, him doing just a full autopsy of the offense through the first 6 weeks and looking at tendencies and maybe some places that they can break tendencies and whatnot, because let's be honest, the second half of the season is going to be much more complicated than the first half of the season. And that's, still with Maryland and Rutgers on the back end of the schedule, which isn't necessarily setting the world on fire in terms of the way that either of those teams have been playing. But, they're going to have to be able to do a lot of things in terms of trying to break some of those tendencies and be ready for teams that are going to have them well scouted once you get into week 13 of the season and whatnot, and not really having any turnaround time from hosting Penn State to going up to Michigan.
Kevin, I threw this out to everyone last week. You weren't around, but this is a team that hit the first quarter against FAU and started rolling, and it really hasn't stopped since, both on offense and defense. It's been a team that was supposed to be challenged by Nebraska. That turned into a joke, 38-0 at half. Michigan State was supposed to provide the resistance. They did a little bit more than Nebraska, but not a whole lot more. That wasn't much of a game as well. We know what's happening here is that the passing game is almost on par with what it was last year with Dwayne Haskins running the show. Again, we need to see better teams, Penn State and Wisconsin in particular, but the offensive line so much better. J.K. Dobbins is determined. The defense is so much better. The athletes on the defensive line and secondary, despite the struggles last year, were elite. The linebacking core was not, even though all three units struggled at various times, especially the back seven. What would be your biggest difference makers in regards to, we know that the defense has improved considerably. They're in position, they're making the plays, they're not missing tackles, not blowing coverages, all those things. But are there particular players on the defense that you think have really upped their games?
I mean, I think that, I think Damon Arnett is the first one that comes to my mind. Damon Arnett really, he had a foot out the door, was ready to go. We've all heard the story about how he talked to Chris Carter, and Chris Carter said, basically, what are you doing? Where do you think you're going? Because it isn't the league. And, he's played very well. We could see this whole secondary leave after this season. Obviously, Damon Arnett's at the end of his eligibility, but, I think he's made himself quite the future just based on the way that he's been playing. I think Pete Werner's playing a lot better, and that's not to say that Pete Werner wasn't playing well in 18, but I think Pete Werner's playing at a much better level than he was, from last year to this year. And I think all the linebackers really just seem to be in much better positions. They're reacting a lot quicker. They're not taking bad angles. And, I hear it time and time again from fans when they're watching 18, just while they're so close to the line of scrimmage. I think that we just see some differences in the way that the scheme is set up. And, I think when you look at the defensive line, it's just a different Chase Young because he's healthy. He's not playing on two bad wheels. We're seeing much more of a consistency to how he played last year at Penn State when he had 3 sacks. He made that final tackle when Penn State was trying to drive with under a minute left to go or so. He's playing like that week in and week out. And I think that, for a player that already was pretty darn special last year, I mean, he truly is the best defensive player in college football this year.
Got Ohio State and Wisconsin, of course, in 2 weeks, and the Buckeyes, of course, Penn State and Michigan to close out the season. Those would seem to be the 3 games that are going to provide some level of resistance. So we'll see what Michigan has for Penn State on the road. That series has been a bit uneven in recent years in regards to, you would think that those 2 teams would really go at it and play some classic games, which they used to. Over the last few years, they have traded routes. Michigan blasted Trace McSorley and company in Ann Arbor last year. The year before, it was Saquon Barkley running all over them, like 42-10 or something in that range. I think that was the score last year as well, 42-7, 42-10. And Michigan got the route fest started 3 years ago in that Penn State season, in which they eventually went to the Rose Bowl, beat Ohio State. Michigan handed them a pretty bad defeat before Penn State got rolling. What's going to catch your eye in regards to seeing these 2 teams go at it, and what are your thoughts going in?
I want to see if the Penn State defense is really as good as the numbers show. And I say that with the caveat that I'm not really convinced that the Michigan offense is all that fixed. I mean, they brought Josh Gaddis down from the booth and put him down on the field, but then the schedule really allowed them to play some teams that were offensively challenged, and they put up points against teams that they're supposed to put points up against. But what happens when they go against a real defense? You sit there and you see what Penn State does, but you look at the Pitt game. I mean, is Pitt real? I mean, I don't know if Pitt's really real at this point, but they struggled in that game. Granted, it's a rivalry game, and I think I'm really curious to see what the Penn State offense is able to do on a Michigan defense that gave up 25 quick points to Illinois. And Penn State's a lot more talented, a lot more explosive. You can get KJ Hamler out there and have him do some things. We'll see if James Franklin is really ready to hand the ball in a much larger role over to Noah Cain. I think they should. That's not taking anything away from any of the other backs, but Noah Cain is special out there, and I think that he gives them the best chance to do some things in a competitive Big Ten. I like Penn State to win, and I think the line's somewhere around 9 at this point. I was talking to our Penn State guy a little bit earlier today, and I like Penn State to win by about 2 touchdowns.
David Shield has a question for us regarding Barron Browning and getting some playing time at linebacker.
Well, I mean, I think that if you look at the snaps, and we have a great partnership with Pro Football Focus, and they provide us some snap counts, and Barron Browning is out there. I mean, he's seeing about as many snaps, if not more, in some games as Tuff Borland, who, Tuff Borland sadly has kind of become a bit of a lightning rod for Ohio State fans. But I think that Barron Browning really has been able to take that step forward. And I think that he's finally in a system that allows him to do what it is that he does well. I mean, he can run for days. When Ohio State put him at the mic, I felt that was a bad spot for him. He's more of an outside backer, in my opinion. But that's just the way that everything kind of set up. And I mean, he's just been, very quick in his reactions. And I mean, he's just super athletic. And when he hits you, he gets you down to the ground. And he's doing everything that Greg Madison and Al Washington are asking of him. And, I would not be surprised to see him continue to get 50, 60% of the snaps. I mean, so much of it depending on what it is they're trying to face in terms of the attack of the opposing team.
So, Roger Shaw, I'm going to respond to your comment right there because I think it's rather poignant in regards to the popularity of our show here because, man, this is a strong effort we bring each and every week. So we got Kevin Noon on the line tonight from Buckeye Grove. We typically have Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone and Steve Hellwagon in particular from Bucknuts. Claire Crawford joins us as well. So I just can't imagine a better Ohio State panel. And we know the popularity of the Buckeyes. The Miami show that we have on just prior to this show, yes, is more popular. We've been doing this Miami show quite a bit longer than Ohio State, but man, Buckeye Nation is enormous. And considering the quality of the content and the insight that we bring on here, Roger, you and others can help us by going out there and grabbing the people that you know on social media and so forth. And it has nothing to do with Ohio State's popularity. Again, we know that, but also in addition to what I'm able to get on my channel for posted videos, not the live stream, but posted videos and content that I provide, Ohio State does as well as any. So please help us out by bringing on more folks. Have a noon on the line from Buckeye Grove talking Ohio State football as the Buckeyes take on Northwestern. So we're halfway through the season. Has anything surprised you about Ohio State football or the Big Ten in general to date?
I think I'm surprised. We'll start kind of with the Big Ten. I'm surprised that Nebraska isn't better than they are. I kind of bought into the Kool-Aid that this was going to be the turnaround year. I really thought that Adrian Martinez was going to take a step forward. I really thought that some of their defensive woes were going to be addressed. Thought they were going to be able to protect their quarterback a little bit better. Proven wrong on all that. Staying in the West, I'm very surprised with Minnesota sitting undefeated right now. I don't think it's going to last much longer. That's not taking anything away from them, but I just don't think that they're right there yet. They got some talented dudes, but I think the schedule will catch up to them. In the East, I think we all came out and were really impressed with Maryland at first, and then Maryland kind of came crashing back down to earth like a failed satellite attempt. They're a mess right now. And I'm pretty surprised with Penn State, to be honest. I thought Penn State was going to be pretty good, but I think that even at the start of the season, I did not think that they would be vying for the number 2 spot in the Big Ten East. And honestly, I think if we put it all there until these two teams play, I mean, based on where everything is, they're vying for the number 1 spot because both teams are undefeated at this point. I thought that potentially the loss of Tommy Stevens to Mississippi State might be too much to overcome. I wasn't sure that Sean Clifford was going to be the guy. And I think the defense has come along a little bit better than I thought it would, based on some departures.
Yeah, and you mentioned the running back situation there at Penn State. They are loaded. Ricky Slade was the kid that people knew about because he got most of the carries in replacing Miles Sanders and giving him relief last season. And he was the incumbent of sorts or the next in line, but he's easily been surpassed by, you mentioned Noah Cain, who had about $120 last week against Iowa on the road. So that's certainly in that type of game, 17-12, that was huge for them to have a kid that really is a grinder and a tough kid that can really has adapted well to the college game right out of the gate as a freshman. Devin Ford's a really good one as well. They were both recruited top 5 in the nation at running back, and Journey Brown as well. And Ricky Slade still getting some time, so they got 4 good running backs. Sean Clifford had a bit of a step back, but again, it was Kinnick Stadium at night on the road, tough Iowa defense, but he really lit it up the 2 previous weeks against lesser competition, but hit on like 12 of 24 for about $117, I think were the numbers against Iowa. Again, difficult place to play as long as you survive and get out of there. And I understand there were a lot of bad calls in that game. I only saw maybe 15 or 20 plays, but Penn State fans were certainly a bit irate about a few calls in that game that they felt kept Iowa in the game. But Penn State clears that hurdle, and they most likely will be undefeated when the 2 teams play. I'm trying to think who else they would have. Of course, Michigan this week is a 9-point favorite, which is pretty substantial. And like you, Nebraska, I didn't want to go that way. I certainly, my initial thoughts were that Iowa and Wisconsin were much more solid teams, but I got swayed as well, Kevin. When I made my final Western Division predictions, I got swayed by the flash of Adrian Martinez and the wonder kid, wonder coaching resume of Scott Frost, that they were going to make it happen this year, and I shouldn't have been duped.
Yeah, I mean, it was really easy. I mean, we were hearing it from all ends about how, this was going to be their year. They were going to, really compete with Wisconsin for that top spot. I was selling on Minnesota, which, obviously has proven to be a mistake so far at this point. But I mean, I just based on from around the time that Nebraska played Ohio State last season until the end of the year, we saw them take a couple steps forward. Well, they gave back all that ground and then some at this point. And then, last week, I guess it was last week, they run together after a while. They didn't even have Martinez in the game. He was injured. And I mean, they're just really missing some guys out there, not having a Stanley Morgan, not having Devon Zigbo. I mean, having guys like that. And then as I've said, pretty much since Nebraska's come over to the Big Ten, they just really, when they made the move over from the Big 12, they packed away the black shirts, and they still haven't found them yet, because that defense has not been able to match up when they go against high major teams.
Jeffrey, so much appreciate the comment and the contribution there. And Jeffrey, I think he understands the vision that we have for this channel and what we've accomplished thus far. So we appreciate it. We aim to do better, but we do provide what we think is top-notch college football analysis right here with folks like Kevin Noon from Rivals, and analysis from myself as well each and every day. We've got 13 matchups coming, 13 previews of the top 13 games in the nation this week, in addition to all the other things we do, the top 25 that actually make sense, all the betting line shows that we do as well, and analysis each and every day. So we appreciate that very much. Man, my mind went blank. I started off on a tangent with what Jeffrey's showing here, and I had a topic in my brain, and it left me. Yeah, somebody had something decent to say in the live chat that that set me up, but I lost it after that. All right, Kevin, I guess we'll I'm going to scan the live chat and see if there's anything else for us, and meanwhile we'll get your prediction on this one against Northwestern. Again, what was supposed to be a trap game way back in the offseason, I think is set up differently than what we expected in regards to Ohio State dominance and just a meager output from this Northwestern offense coming in.
Yeah, I've really looked at this game, and I've talked to some people, and they're like, well, Ohio State could be a little rusty coming out of the open week, but Northwestern was on an open week as well, too. And if the offensive output we've seen out of the Cats so far is them as a well-oiled machine, imagine what they would be like when they were rusty. That would be less than 0 points at that point. And, they're playing the game on actual natural grass, and there are all the stories about how it's going to be about 3 feet high, anything they can do to try and slow down Ohio State. I don't think Ohio State's going to come out and be super sharp, but then again, an average second quarter for Ohio State's been about 21 points so far this year. I think they're going to maintain some of that. I don't really think that Northwestern is going to be able to keep Ohio State from marching down the field. I think they will keep them from hitting big pops. I think it's going to be a lot more sustained drives, 7, 8, 9, 10 play drives. But I don't see Northwestern getting on the scoreboard unless Ohio State really gives some points. I think it's going to be a good game for Chris Chuginoff and Gunnar Hoke to be able to come in, and some of the young guys maybe have some ideas about who they're redshirting and not. J.K. Dobbins, I like for going for about $1.25 in this game. I like Ohio State to win in the neighborhood of about 45-0.
So, of course, when you talk about the conditions of the field based on the maintenance or lack thereof, but also combine that with possible weather conditions. I don't know if you've checked the forecast. I have not, but it's that time of year when, I'm sitting here in Connecticut. It felt like a late summer day yesterday. It was pushing 80 and it was beautiful, not a cloud in the sky. And now we're getting hammered with rain, and it feels like it's about 43 degrees outside. And so, especially in Chicago, close to Chicago in the Midwest, weather could be a factor. Don't know if have you checked on that?
I looked about 2 days ago, and the rain wasn't supposed to come in until Sunday. So it would really take a significant change in that in any storm track to be an issue. But you're right on the lake, so you just don't know what you're going to get. I mean, some pop-up stuff can happen, but I think that there's a chance that it could probably still be a little dampish just based on dew and things along those lines. But it's just going to be that grass, and Ryan Day was saying that they let the grass get a little bit longer over there at the Woody in terms of practicing on the couple of grass fields, so they would be ready. And even Northwestern itself, their athletic account had a little fun with it, and they posted a picture on social media making it look like the grass was nine inches tall.
Well, if you can read between the lines, Kevin, what I'm trying to do is fish for a storyline for an upset, because I can't find one otherwise. And usually I could against Northwestern. Usually it would be, okay, they're scrappy. They're 4-2 right now. They're playing pretty well. They've shown us some flashes. They if they work out the game plan in such a way that they keep the ball and run the play clock and do all the right things and keep the ball for 35 minutes, and they could add A, B, and C together and make it happen. But man, it's just almost impossible to fathom how they could score anywhere close to 20 points on this team.
No, they're gonna be hard pressed to do that. I mean, if they weren't able to do it against some of the much less stingy defenses on the schedule, I don't know how they're going to do it here. Again, turnovers can always be a bit of an equalizer there, but I don't think there are enough turnovers there to really make this game competitive unless Ohio State comes out there and just absolutely leaves its hands in Columbus. It's just going to be very hard pressed at that point. I think Northwestern could come out and play an A+ type of game defensively and hold Ohio State into scoring 28, dare I say 24. But as I said earlier, I don't know how they get to 10. I really don't know how they get to 10, short of a situation of where Ohio State fumbles a kickoff on the one and Northwestern falls on it or something along those lines. Because I did a lot of research this week just because that's what I do, but I haven't seen like the average length of their drive. But I have to imagine that based on their 2 passing touchdowns and whatever it is, 4, 6, I don't remember, rushing touchdowns. I can't imagine that they did a lot of those where they covered 85, 90 yards down the field. I'd have to imagine that they were aided in some of those.
I've got to do that. And when I do, I'll send a DM to you, Kevin, with my research. You've just made me curious. I've got to look that up as well. I just can't imagine when you've got 2 touchdown passes and you've played 5 games. It's just pretty awful. Theo in particular, James, and many others, we appreciate you encouraging everyone to like the video. Kevin has done yeoman's work here. He's completely lifted the show on his shoulders. So Kevin, we appreciate you taking the link this week with everyone off apparently, and getting us set for Ohio State and Northwestern. I'll let you go. I'm going to stay on the line just a couple more minutes and grab some comments and questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate you stopping by.
See you next week.
Yeah, enjoy the trip. We'll see you.